Straight Lines with Elizabeth Kaiser on News Talk FTL.
Welcome back to Straight Lines with Elizabeth Kaiser every Sunday at 8 p.m. So this week and this evening, I have with me a very well-known doctor, Dr. Michael Lewis. He's actually a retired Army colonel. He's a physician and a public health researcher, and you know I am all about health. And, just to kind of put things in context, I am all about, AI, health, and law. We're going to go into all three this evening, but make sure you take some notes here. AI and health intersect like no other. And a lot of you out there are thinking, how in the world does health have anything to do with AI and AI have anything to do with health? Believe me, the more you listen to this show every Sunday evening, you will understand how AI and health intersect. This evening, we're going to talk about the health of your brain, the most important organ on your body. And with me, I have a Dr. Michael Lewis. He's an author. He's a physician, again, a public health researcher. He's a retired Army colonel. And he's amazing with what he's done and what he's doing today. Dr. Lewis, are you there?
I am, Elizabeth. It's great to join you. Thank you.
Yes. I'm so happy that you're with us. And, just yesterday, in fact, you and I had an awesome opportunity. Gosh, you taught me so much. We were on the phone for probably over an hour, and that was an amazing conversation because, I am so much smarter today because of that phone call, and I love that because the intelligence that just went into my brain is now going to be executed and helping me and my loved ones and my orbit and anybody that I touch to become healthier because I've got a lot of the intelligence of Dr. Lewis in my brain now, and I could not be happier for that. I'm very privileged. So, you know me, I love deep academic, very scientific conversations about the body. Always have had. Somebody asked me recently, they said, and I love this, he got to know me pretty well the way I was kind of analyzing, dissecting some very esoteric reading. And he said, what possessed you to become a lawyer? And I laughed and I said, I didn't want to be a lawyer. I wanted to be a doctor, but I couldn't go to medical school at the time. So I went to law school. Anyway, so let's talk about your book, When Brains Collide. I want to know a little bit more about that book and what compelled you to write that book.
Well, to me, it's an interesting story. I don't know, hopefully your listeners, but around the time that I was looking at this was probably about 10 years ago, and I was doing some work as an advisor and they decided to do a radio campaign around the NFL football playoffs and the Super Bowl coming up. And the PR firm that they used out of Tampa, the head of that said, well, we got to have a title to pitch this to the radio stations around the country. And they picked the name When Helmets Collide, thinking football. And so every interview I did, the interviewer was like, so where can we get your book? Or when is your book coming out? And I was like, soon, and so I kind of got pressured into writing the book, and which was a good thing because it was really just good to get it all out of my head and on the paper. And so it was, and I was fortunate. There was a new company at the time called Book in a Box, and it's now I think called Scribe or Scribe.com, something like that. I think they've changed their name, and I was one of their first clients, and it was basically, I didn't have to write a book. I talked a book. I spent hours and hours on the phone with an interviewer to do the outlining, and then they said, okay, well, we're going to connect you with a ghostwriter. We'll get you a good scientific writer. I said, no, wait, I don't want I don't want a scientific writer. I want a soccer mom in middle America that knows nothing about the science.
Yeah.
And that's why the book reads as it does. I had to explain it to her so that she could understand it.
So I want to talk about the science, and I'm going to tell you what your book stands for, even though I'm not the author, and you tell me if I'm right or missing the mark, add any nuances that you feel. But it stands for the position that a TBI, an acronym for traumatic brain injury, and concussions are massively undertreated, and that modern Western diets and the approach between modern Western diets and the massively undertreated concussions and TBIs. That treatment is grossly inadequate, and that we're missing the mark with the balance and the ratios between omega-3, the omega-3 fatty acids. Can you explain to the audience, what do omega-3 fatty acids have to do with injury to the brain?
Well, absolutely. The brain's made of fat, bottom line, right? And we all know this. We've all talked about it, all our lives, right? And we call, jokingly or not jokingly, people fat heads and, things like that. Just, so the brain's made of fat, cholesterol, omega-6s, omega-3s, omega-9s, all these different types of fats. And about 30% of the dry weight of a brain is omega-3 fats. And over the history of mankind, our bodies were developed to have this balance between omega-6 type of fats and omega-3 type of fats. And that balance is important. It's because the downstream effects of inflammation from sort of the omega-6 side and the resolving capabilities of the omega-3. So you need inflammation, to repair our bodies from daily life and radiation exposure to the sun and, to the ground and just in general, right? The air we breathe, we're always being bombarded. And so we have inflammation. And, it's not just twisting your ankle and it swells up. That's also inflammation. But we need to resolve the inflammation, and that's what omega-3s do. So our bodies were designed, and all the enzymes and everything, for that balance.
Okay.
But starting in the late 1960s, around 1970s, everything changed. And it was the advent of the Farm Bill and corporate farming. And I say that, we came out of World War II, the greatest generation and all that. We conquered polio. We eliminated smallpox. And then in 1968, we put a man on the moon. There was nothing we couldn't do. The Surgeon General of the United States at the time said, we have, infectious diseases are a thing of the past. Couldn't have been more wrong.
Wow.
But there wasn't anything we couldn't do. But how do we still have starving children in Appalachia? And so this advent, when men and women came back from World War II, they didn't come back to the family farms. They went to the cities and the suburbs. And so the Farm Bills were really about how do we grow the most calorically dense, easy to grow, shelf-stable kind of food? And the answer, which most people think is corn, is not corn. It's soybean. And the amount of soybean grown corporately just exploded. In fact, from 1970 to 2000, the amount of soybean oil consumed by the average American went up 16-fold. 1,600%.
16 times? And, are you kidding?
Yeah, and it's probably a lot worse now.
Wow. Yeah,
But, in 2000 when it was measured, it was 16-fold.
Okay.
And so that's when really everything started to change. So the omega-6 to 3 ratio, which is important, it's meant to be 50-50, 1-to-1.
Okay.
It went from a typical 2 or 3 to 1 around that time to now we're seeing upwards of 25, even higher, 25, 30, 40 to 1 out of balance between omega-6s and omega-3s. So it's no longer a fair fight, and the inflammation is winning.
And Dr. Lewis, let me put that in context just for the audience.
Yeah.
Just let me interject just a little bit. There is a term that the audience has been taught by me. I've been talking about this for probably 6, 7, 8 months now with what RFK is doing, but it's removing seed oils. So what Dr. Lewis is referring to when he's talking about soybean oil, that's also known as seed oil. And as we know, if you've been taking notes for the last few months, I'm always trying to say we're trying to provide an education to the audience too about the health so we can all feel better when we get out of bed. But those seed oils is what causes the spike in the omega-6 fatty acids, and that's where you get your balance really skewed because you've got too much omega-6, which is from what Dr. Lewis is referring to, which is a soybean oil. Also in those seed oil categories, Dr. Lewis, is that also like canola oil and other types of seed oils?
Right, and vegetable oil,
Okay.
safflower, sunflower. If it's coming from a seed, that's what we call the seed oil. So, in my world, in my house, even 80 to 90% of the oil that we use is olive oil, and the other 10% or so is avocado and coconut oil.
So
And that's the only kind of oils we have in our house.
And that is a very good example. So what happens to the body? And I want the audience to understand why this is so damaging to the body when you have this too much omega-6 versus too much or not enough omega-3. What happens to the body at the cellular level?
So at the cellular level, so you have to understand, if you think back to your high school chemistry and the ball and stick model, omega-6 molecule, if you had one of those ball and stick, it's a very stiff molecule.
Okay.
And an omega-3 molecule is very flexible. And both are important. They're both essential fatty acids, meaning we have to consume them. Both have absolutely essential roles in our body. The problem is we just have way too many omega-6s. It's the out of balance part. So omega-6s are important. We need them. But that stiff molecule is a good thing and a bad thing. It makes it very shelf stable, so we can process food with it and ship it around the world. Like I say, you can put a box of crackers in the sun for 3 days. It might be stale, but you can still eat it. You put a piece of salmon in the sun for an hour or two, you probably don't want to eat it because the omega-3 molecules are very flexible, but that comes with a cost and that they can go rancid very quickly.
I want you to talk about something you shared with me, which is just really puts everything you're saying, Dr. Lewis, and just galvanizes it to a great illustration. It's the Sego Mine disaster. We've got a couple minutes before we're going to take a break. Can you talk to me about that? I know it's in your book, but this to me is riveting.
Well, in January 2006, there was the Sego Mine accident. I think it was January 2nd. The Sego Mine accident in West Virginia, where a number of miners, 21 or 22 miners, were trapped a mile underground in a coal mine. Mm-hmm. And it took 41 hours to get to them. And when they did, there was only one guy left alive, barely. And he had massive heart attack and liver failure, kidney failure, all those things. I mean, it was amazing that he was alive. And so they did everything they could to keep him alive, dialysis, and he had carbon monoxide poisoning, all of that, methane gas poisoning. And so they did everything they could to keep him alive, like hyperbaric oxygen and renal dialysis and so on. They still were left with a guy that basically had no brainwave activity. And the short of the story is that they started pouring really high doses of fish oil down his feeding tube. Mm-hmm. And the very short answer is 2 or 3 months later, he walked out of the hospital.
That's crazy.
And so I kept hearing about this in 2006
right.
And eventually thought, well, if it worked for that, would it work for traumatic brain injury? So I went to the Defense Veteran Brain Injury Center at Walter Reed Medical Center, the military hospital, and asked the head of research, is anybody looking at omega-3s like from this to, for traumatic brain injury? And the answer was, no, why don't you? It's like, I don't know anything about it. And I'm like, yeah, but you're the only one asking the question.
Okay.
And that was in December of 2006. And I've been on that quest ever since.
And we're going to talk about that quest too. We're going to take a quick break. And then when we come back, I want you to tell the audience about this quest that you shared with me yesterday, because that is fascinating. And I'm just going to put a backdrop out there so people understand that all they're going to be doing is go get a drink of water or go get a drink of whatever and come back and sit down, because this is going to be fascinating. Dr. Lewis is trying to get this protocol of omega-3, very scientifically based, into the military, into the NFL, soccer players, people who are at high risk for any kind of concussion or traumatic brain injury. He's been working with the Army Rangers, the elite strike force, and we're going to talk about that. So let's take a break and we'll be right back.
Straight Lines with Elizabeth Kaiser. Straight Lines with Elizabeth Kaiser.
Okay, we're back with Dr. Lewis. And for those of you who are just joining right now, this is Dr. Michael Lewis. He is a retired Army colonel, He is a doctor. He's a graduate of West Point. I don't think I even mentioned that in the beginning of the program. He's got so many credentials, it's kind of hard to cover them all. And it's quite the privilege and honor to have him with us on the show tonight. We're talking about the importance of the omega-3 and 6 ratio as to the health of the human brain. And this is so important. So, Dr. Lewis, let's talk about, I'd like to start with all of the challenges that you have gone through now for years trying to get this omega-3, 6 ratio protocol into the programs of the Human and Health Services, RFK, MAHA, the military, the NFL, there's certain sports where people are at high risk for any kind of traumatic brain injuries, the special strike forces of the Army Rangers and all of the above. And I believe it might be a good place to start, is the article that you co-authored with a Dr. Heblin. Can you tell us about that, and when did that occur?
Well, when I first asked the question in December 2006, I was told, why don't you look into it? And I didn't know anything about it. And they said, you're the only one asking the question. I realized I really didn't know anything about it. So I sought out the leading experts in the world who knew anything about omega-3s in brain health and traumatic brain injury. And the people that knew anything about traumatic brain injury and omega-3s, you could count on one hand. And but I had to teach myself. And so one of the people that I reached out to was a guy named Dr. Joe Heblin. He was a psychiatrist at the NIH, running a lab at the NIH at the time. And as we were getting to know each other, and he was teaching me about omega-3s and brain health, he said we could just answer a lot of questions if we could just draw blood on people before they commit suicide. And I'm like, oh, that's easy. And he looked at me like, I was kind of crazy, right? Yeah. And it's like, no, the Department of Defense has like 70 million blood specimens in a freezer like 2 miles from where we live, kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And I said, how many do you think we need? And so we put together a study, and we looked at 800 investigated suicides of active duty personnel, not 22 veterans a day. We're talking about active duty, young, healthy people. Okay. And we looked at 800 documented suicides with well-matched controls. And as we basically came to two conclusions. One is the amount of omega-3s in the blood was profoundly low. I mean, crazy low. Mm-hmm. We talked about the ratio of omega-6 to 3. It was 26 to 1 out of balance. Wow. So the amount of omega-3s was just profoundly low. It's the only way I can put it. But even with that, we were able to delineate that there was correlated to a 62% increased risk of suicide, meaning somebody with low omega-3 levels had a 62% greater risk of committing suicide than somebody that had healthy levels of omega-3s in their blood. Okay. And that's a lot of scientific evidence. That's a lot of scientific evidence. And we published it in December of 2011, right as I was getting ready to retire from the military. And I thought it was going to set off a good storm in the military, and yet it just got buried, honestly. Well, for a while, I think you said that just for a while, it was kind of a flash or transient, but it was hitting some headlines. And didn't even Dr. Gupta cover that as well? Well, Dr. Gupta covered a traumatic brain injury case that was based on how I applied what we learned from the Sego Mine accident to an 18-year-old that had been in a car accident in the D.C. area, and was basically, the parents were told, pull the plug, he's not going to survive. Okay. And basically I got a mutual friend reached out to me, and it's one of those stories you couldn't make up. I mean, literally, I was in uniform on the steps of the U.S. Capitol on Brain Injury Awareness Day, and I get this call from a friend at the FDA, and he says, "Do you think that we could, use omega-3s, with this kid?" And I'm like, it's never been done before, but we got nothing to lose. And the very short answer is this kid who they should have pulled the plug on, he shouldn't have survived, walked walked across the stage at his high school graduation 3 months later. And that's the story that Sanjay Gupta covered.
Okay.
He didn't cover the suicide aspect. That was a whole different thing that when we published it, it ended up on the front page of pretty much every newspaper in the country and on all the network news around the country. But it was a 10-second flash in the pan.
Yeah, yeah. And you said something that, after this amazing discovery of the 62% increase in suicide and the correlation with the low omega-3 levels of the blood, and you had 800 documented suicides of active military members, and then you said it got buried. There were some things that had happened, though. I want you to give the audience the details of what happened blow by blow after you had that discovery and what kind of conversations you had.
Well, I tried to float it up to the top of the Army so that they could get ahead of it.
Okay.
A lifetime, my entire adult life at that point had been spent in the Army. I mean, it's in my blood through and through. So I wanted the Army to get ahead of it. Mm-hmm. And it just got shot down a couple of times. Like, we don't believe it. It's BS or whatever. And it gets shot down. And they're like, oh, screw it then. We'll just publish it. And like I said, it ends up on the front page of all the papers, and the 4-star general, the vice chief of staff of the Army, the number 2 general in the Army, was giving a talk at a TBI conference like the next day. And I had the chance to reach out to him, and he hands me his card and says, come to my office and teach me what I need to know. And it was all very positive, and the next Wednesday I'm in his office, and I start to teach him, about the science, and, it was a conversation. It was just the two of us plus his scientific advisor. And he said, well, what's the downside? I'm like, it's fish oil. It's not a downside. And he goes, well, that's not what the Army Surgeon General tells me. And I'm like, well, what does he tell you? And I don't even know, because I started laughing because it was so ridiculous. And he stopped me and like, what's so funny? And it's like, well, he's full of it. And and you're telling me the U.S. Army Surgeon General, 3-star general, my chief medical advisor, the top doctor in the Army, blah, 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 MD and PhD in nutrition from Harvard Medical School, you're saying he's full of it. And I was like, yes, sir, that's exactly what I'm telling you. And I gave him a bottle of fish oil. I said, here, take it. This is the protocol that I'm putting people on. And he's already take fish oil. I'm like, not like fish yarns. And so he did for 2 days, because that's why I always remember it was a Wednesday night. Because Saturday morning I get a call. The general's on his way to buy more fish oil. What should he get? And like, did he have side effects? No. Did he notice a difference? And this is a quote. He says, yes, not only did he notice a difference, his staff noticed a difference, and most importantly, his wife noticed a difference. And that was in just 2 days. So I knew it worked. Even with healthy people, I've proven it over and over again that it can make a difference. And energy levels, helping calm people down, helping with their anxiety, if you will. Now, these are not FDA-approved claims or anything. These are just my observations. But most people tell me wow, I didn't know I was supposed to have this much energy and think this clear.
Yeah. That's
the big thing.
And let's put this, in perspective too. A long, long time ago in our very traditional original diets, before the industrial agricultural revolution, when we started planting all these rows and rows, but when people used to forage and harvest and grow their crops, our ratios back then were, and I'm quoting the famous doctor, that she was the pioneer of the omega balances. I think she's 92 years old now. Armidas Simopoulos. Am I saying the name correctly? She's a Greek doctor.
Artemis
Simopoulos. Yeah, Greek doctor, wonderful lady, Artemis Simopoulos. And we had ratios back then when we were healthy, and people, of course, were much more active as well. But those ratios were anywhere to 4 to 1 to 1 to 1. And now our average ratios are anywhere from, that varies from country to country, 20 to 1. Sometimes you see 60 to 1. Japan is doing pretty good, 8 to 1, but they're still too high. And you've got India, which is really bad. In fact, India might even be worse than our country. But when you say fish oil, I want to really add some nuances, which are so important, because people out there are thinking, oh, fish oil. Okay, well, this is, all right, where are we going with this? It's like, okay, well, here's the bottom line. All of the different fish oils that you can buy from the big box retails and the Amazon, the supplement store, and blah, 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 are not the bottled oil, which actually gives you the omega-3 that stabilizes in the bloodstream, that doesn't oxidize after 4 hours because it's infused with polyphenols, which is your natural extra virgin olive oil from Spain. So I want you to describe this type of fish oil. We don't even call it fish oil. We call it oily fish because it's really not, it's not even in a capsule. It's in a bottle. And these fish come from, I believe, the bottom of South America, and they get cleaned in Iceland, and they get reconstituted with the top tier scientific extra virgin olive oil from Spain. They get reconstituted in Oslo, Norway. I mean, this is some prime elite stuff. Does not come from the United States. So I want you to explain the nuances of the quality and the scientific backing between this product and why it works.
Well, it's a relatively new but yet old concept, right? So when omega-3s, at some point you have to ask yourself, well, where do fish get their omega-3s? Because it turns out fish don't come with omega-3s. They consume them, and it bioaccumulates up through the food chain. And so where do fish get their omega-3s? And that's why some fish are higher in omega-3s, and other fish may not even have any omega-3s because they're not, they have to consume it. They just don't naturally come with it. And where it comes from ultimately is from algae. And when it comes from algae, the omega-3s are wrapped in a protective coating at the molecular level. They're wrapped in a protective coating of polyphenols, basically like a lipid, a fat layer around the omega-3s. And that's what bioaccumulates all the way up through the food chain until man gets a hold of it. And then we have to, so then we process it. And when we process fish, we have to be concerned about mercury, heavy metals, plastics, and all the stuff that unfortunately the ocean gives us as well.
Right.
And so we don't want to concentrate the mercury and make it worse, right? So we have to 100% of fish oil on the market does not have appreciable amounts of mercury and plastics and stuff like that. That's a misnomer, an old wives' tale. So forget that. 100% of fish oil is cleaned of all that. But during that cleaning process, we also destroy that lipid, that fat layer protection around the omega-3 molecules and in the process of cleaning without going into the whole process. And so basically we take that and we either concentrate the omega-3s or sometimes we put it back into the triglyceride form, which is even better than what the cleaning process form is and so on, without trying to get too deep into the manufacturing. So that's what gets put out onto the market, whether it's your really high quality, expensive fish oil where it's been put back into triglyceride form and concentrated, or whether it's the really cheap and crappy stuff that actually the pharmaceutical companies sell for 20 times as much. It's in this form that our bodies don't recognize, and it doesn't have that protection around it. And so a scientist about 15, 20 years ago named Ola Edey figured out, well, what if we took the polyphenols from olive oil and at the molecular level put them back together, and that will be like what nature intended. And so he figured that out about 15, 20 years ago. Interestingly enough, about 12 years ago, he reached out to me wanting to discuss this project he was working on. And that project is now a full-blown company, global company that puts a product out that has this polyphenol protection to where, call it a Mediterranean diet in a bottle. It's more like oily fish in a bottle than fish oil.
And I know I'm gonna say the company because I'm involved with it now. Believe me, I've got everybody on it. These were my Christmas gifts, and it's called Zinzino. And I'm going to come out with it. If anybody is interested in this product, all you got to do is email thekaisergroup@gmail.com. It's pretty easy. The Kaiser, which is my last name, Kayser, group at gmail.com. So I want to put that out there really quick because it's important. And we've just got a couple minutes, Dr. Lewis. I want you to tell the audience that you were given $1 million for a study, but they kind of corrupted the study and they basically were going to put you in shackles and do it their way instead of your way, right? And then you declined. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, I was awarded $1 million grant to do a study with the 75th Ranger Regiment.
Okay.
And as I was putting the study together and was becoming more and more known, I don't know necessarily what the forces were behind it. But eventually the Ranger Regiment said, no, we're not going to do this. We're not going to do the study the way that you want to design it and have designed it. We'll do it this other way. And basically the research command said, no, if you do it that way, then, it's not the study we funded and we're going to take the money back. And it was just, I was stuck between a rock and a hard place.
Yeah.
And wasn't able to do it. And then comes along, I published the study about the suicide.
Right.
And somebody forwarded an email between the 3-star Surgeon General and the 2-star head of the research command, emails back and forth, basically said, how do we shut this guy up and make him go away? And I did it for him. I said, I've had enough. I got enough time. I retired and left active duty. So.
And then there was apparently, so to put Army Rangers in perspective, that is an elite strike force. They report, I think, under the, is it the JSOC, right? The JSOC.
Right. The Joint Special Operations Command.
Okay. Which is a top tier command, and it oversees the most elite tier 1 special mission units. Every military branch has their own. You've got the Navy with the Delta Force, and you've got SEAL Team 6 with the Navy, and then you've got Delta Force. You've got the Rangers with the Army, so that's how important this study was. And then you heard later there was a $12 million study that surfaced, and it pretty much really didn't go anywhere, did it?
No, unfortunately, the $12 million, instead of coming to me to help put the study together,
right,
they went to a researcher down in South Carolina, who a PhD researcher who knew nothing about the military really, and was not really a very big advocate on omega 3s. And really, the bottom line was she wasted $12 million and never accomplished any of the aspects of the study that she was supposed to do.
Yeah.
I look at that as like that's $12 million that we could have really used for a lot of good.
But Dr. Lewis, you're still trying to get this protocol, though, into really to MAHA, RFK, HHS, and all of the administrative power so that they can adopt that. And there is some work in progress with those endeavors, is there?
Absolutely.
Okay.
And, my biggest inroads are probably have been with the Special Operations Command, the larger Special Operations Command, where it's being used by different units out there it's almost like dealing with the NFL or colleges, where different colleges or different NFL teams will use it and other teams don't. Different units in the military, have taken to heart what I have published and put out there, and others haven't. But, so it's making headway, but you would think, the 12, I started off on some things, 12, 15 years ago. Yeah. And I would have thought that they would have been mainstream medicine within 5 years.
You would think.
Here we are 10, 15 years later, and it's still not.
Just like your salt and pepper shaker, there should be a bottle of oily fish right there on your counter that you take a swig of every day. Seriously, with your water.
And interesting, when I was talking with the 4-star general in the Pentagon, I told him you can't force people to take fish oil.
Yeah.
And he was, why not? And I was like, well, because it'll get derailed and so on. And I said, but you know what you can do is you need to mandate that people get tested.
Yeah.
Because if they know what their levels are, they'll do something about it. Testing is
on their own volition. Right. You can't get in trouble for that. Just show them the numbers.
Right. But you mandate testing, the rest of it will take care of itself.
So one last thing, and then we're going to have to definitely take another break. But the reason why it's so important that Dr. Lewis is getting this protocol into what he's working with, the SOC, Special Ops Command, is the fact that these teams and these military people are so exposed to blast exposures and concussions. They call it subconcussive impacts because of what they do. And not only that, but they're also subject to chronic inflammation and high oxidative stress, and very high risk for neurodegenerative risk because of what they do. So that's why it's so important for this very targeted population to have this protocol, and not just to treat injuries, but to be prophylactic, to put them on this omega-3 protocol so that when they are injured, because many are, that the body and the brain will recover so much quicker. Look at the Sego Mine incident. So anyway, we're gonna have to take a break right now and wrap this up. Dr. Lewis, thank you so much for joining us this evening. This has been fascinating. Whatever I can do, I'm going to help you get your message, because I've been trying to get a hold of Maha myself. That is, I tell you what, that's kind of a closed door, but we're not going to give up. So I'm going to do everything in my power to get your message to the people that matter, and hopefully incorporate this into the protocol with all of the agenda that RFK is working on with Maha. You know, he's getting seed oils out of the food industry. I would think that this would just be, very naturally second in line, right?
Well, absolutely. And, it's an important, obviously important topic that literally to go back to something you said earlier, when Artemis Simopoulos, she submitted a white paper to the White House back in March, and she called it a matter of national security. That's how important this topic really is. And
I'm so happy that you said that. We got 15 seconds. There is a white paper March of this year, and it is a matter of national security. And this is from Dr. She's the pioneered the omega-3 6 ratio. And that white paper went to the White House March of this year. And she does call this a crisis. And she's an amazing woman. Amazing woman. I would love to have an opportunity to meet her someday. Dr. Lewis, thank you so much. I'm so happy to have met you. And thank you for making me so much more intelligent with regarding health. Last night in our hour and 15-minute long conversation, that was amazing. And that's hopefully going to move the needle. And I'm certainly going to be getting as many people aware of the critical foundational element of these omega balances, especially with the brain. And when it comes
can I make a quick shameless plug?
Yes.
My book, When Brains Collide, is available on Amazon. And actually, I published it 8 years ago, and it's still selling month after month because it's such an important message. So When Brains Collide, if you got an extra $20, jump on Amazon.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I got the privilege of having the PDF book, but that's only for me because I put Dr. Lewis on my show. So thank you so much. You have a wonderful, wonderful week, and we'll be right back.
Straight Lines with Elizabeth Kaiser on News Talk STL.